So our topic today is OEM specific training. Continuing on with our OEM specific training. And today it is Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. It's a lot to spell out, so we just said it was CDJR, right? Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram products. Still pretty popular over here. All of those different brands are pretty popular over here. Maybe over in Europe, it's a little less so, but we're here in North America, and that's what we're talking about. So first off, let's start with a little bit of history, right? So the company writ large was founded by Walter Chrysler in 1925. And they released the Chrysler 6 back in 1924, so a little bit before the company was actually founded. They ended up acquiring Dodge shortly thereafter in 1928. They also created the Plymouth and DeSoto brands in 1928, around about the same time as they acquired Dodge. So with all that and with all these brands that they had now, they created a bit of a brand hierarchy, right? So your Plymouth was going to be your lower priced vehicles. Your Dodge and DeSoto are going to be kind of your midline vehicles. And then Chrysler is your top of the line as far as they were concerned. That was your higher priced vehicles. So it went on through the years, and over time in the 70s, quality began to start to suffer. So in 1978, Lee Iacocca came on, and his job was to turn the company around. So there were a lot of different moves made in around that time. You would see like your K cars come around during that era. A lot of different things were done. That's way too much to summarize here, but he did a lot of things to help turn the company around. 1983, the Caravan slash Voyager was introduced. So Dodge Caravan, Plymouth Voyager. And that was really your introduction to the minivan. And they still make a version of that nowadays. Chrysler makes that. 1985, I remember these vehicles. I wasn't very old back then, but I do remember these vehicles. Growing up, you would end up with some of these. Diamond Star Motors. So that was your like Eagle Talons and Mitsubishi Diamantes, and the 3000 GT was part of that, and the Eclipse was part of that. So a lot of those, all-wheel drive turbocharged cars, late 80s, early 90s, that's really where that came from, was that partnership, that Diamond Star Motors partnership. AMC slash Jeep was acquired in 1987, so that's where they rolled Jeep in. In 98, they merged with Daimler to form Daimler Chrysler, which you would have heard of back then. Then they went through the years, went through that downturn in 2008 where most of the auto manufacturers had to get bailed out, stuff like that. So coming out of bankruptcy, they spun off Ram as its own separate company in 2010. In 2014, Fiat purchased Chrysler, giving us FCA. So we went from Daimler Chrysler to FCA. And then in 2021, FCA merged with the PSA group, which is Peugeot, Citroen, DS, Opel, and Vauxhall over in Europe. And now it is called Stellantis. But it hasn't seemed to me that that's really caught on yet, at least over here in the States. But anytime you go to like any of their websites or things, just sign up for technical information and stuff, it's under Stellantis. So I think over time we'll be seeing a lot more of that name, Stellantis. That's the name they created for that combo company with FCA and PSA. So it's called Stellantis as a business entity. So, I mean, if you work there, I'm sure you hear it, but out aftermarket, maybe not as much. So let's talk about the top models. So we have our sales total for North America from 2013 to 2023. So that's roughly the last 10 years. And no surprise, if you look around on the streets, the pickup, Dodge pickup, Ram pickup, would be Ram pickup for those years. So the Ram pickup, 5 million, over 5 million sales. Next one, the Grand Cherokee. So an SUV, we like our SUVs over here. The Jeep Wrangler, of course, a very hot seller for Jeep. The Jeep regular Cherokee, then the Compass. Then we finally get to our first car, which is the Charger, just shy of 1 million sales there. Then we get the Caravan, the Pacifica, our two minivans. Then we have the Dodge Journey and the Dodge Durango to round out the top 10. So you see the majority of them are SUVs or trucks. So and that's just overall, I think you can kind of see in the North American market, that's what it is. Number one sellers in F-150, then the Chevy Silverado, and then the Ram pickup. So there you go. So we picked a few representatives out of that. We looked at sales year on year to see, where was roughly the high water mark for some of these models. So the first one we picked out was a 2019 Ram pickup. So that was, of course, the high water mark for that. As far as that is concerned, it was the 5th generation of Ram pickups. It was offered with a 3.6 liter, 5.7 liter gas engines in the 1500, also 6.4 liter gas and 6.7 liter diesels in the HD model. So they're the 1500s, they're kind of their lighter duty. Then you get to the 2500, 3500, and so on. That's your 6.4 gas and 6.7 diesel. 6-speed and 8-speed automatic transmissions available. And this was also the first year of the ETorque system, which is optional. We'll mention that a little bit later on in the program here. Another good representative, Jeep Grand Cherokee was number 2 on the list. So 2017 was kind of the high water mark there. This was your 4th generation of Jeeps that year, offered with your 3.6, 5.7, and 6.4 liter gas. You're going to see that across the board, kind of. If we think about consolidation in the automotive industry and using the same type of components across the board, Stellantis is very, very big on that right now. So you're going to see a 3.6 in Jeeps and Dodges and Rams and Chryslers. So you're going to see that 3.6 across the board, that 5.7 Hemi across the board, 6.4. It's going to be your bigger, kind of in your higher speed vehicles. And in this case, also offered a 3-liter diesel over here. And not a lot of diesels to see over in North America right now, as far as in a non-pickup truck. So yeah, those are out there as well. 8-speed transmission was the only offering for that, automatic, of course. And this also shares a platform of Mercedes-Benz GLE. So that was around the time of your Daimler Chrysler era, right? So they share the same platform. And then we had the 2019 Dodge Charger. I decided to pull out a car out of there. Like I said, less than 1 million sales, but it's really the only car on that list. So it's the 7th generation of the Charger. Once again, that 3.6, a 5.7, 6.2 supercharged, and a 6.4 liter gas engine there. 8-speed automatic transmission only, available in GT, SXT, RT, Pursuit, Hellcat, and Scat Pack trims. So that's, as we go further up, the engines get bigger and the horsepower gets much more. So those are pretty fun cars when you get up into the larger engines, and they're really the only ones doing that right now. Of course, unfortunately, I think in the last year or two, they said we're going to stop making cars altogether. So bye-bye Charger, Hellcat. It was fun while it lasted, I guess, right? So you got to hit those cafe numbers. Common issues across the board, and a lot of this is garnered just from data, even just seeing what people are working on the cars. A lot of issues with like cam sensors seem to come up a lot, and we'll talk about why that is here in a little bit. A lot of thermostat codes, coolant system issues, overheating issues, stuff like that. A lot of evap issues, as any manufacturer has, and then of course misfire issues like a lot of manufacturers. And some of that's going to play out here on this next. It's going to play out in a big way. One of those categories, anyways, on this next phase here. Common codes. So this is based off the top 3,500, I think, codes that we've gotten out of the scan tools. Here's what people are looking at. And the number one, which I thought was really interesting, our 2019 Ram 1500, there's our representative there. U11E9, which is a communications code for the engine. And it's lost communication with the AGS. So that's the active grille shutter. So you will see as we go through the data that active grille shutter, for some reason, they just have some issues on these Rams. That's the kind of the grille shutters that close in the grille to let the car heat up quicker in cooler weather, that type of thing. So a lot of lost communications with that. That's number one on the list. And I think if I recall, that was in the 60s, like 63 or 64 in the overall list. So that's pretty high up. Then we got our one diesel on here, the ABS code, pump motor control. And then if we go down here, we got a 3.2, and then the rest of these are 3.6. All the same base engine, just different model years. And a lot of them are thermostat codes. We're seeing a lot of thermostat codes just, I think, in general in the industry, across the board. And then there's our evap code, and then oil pressure control circuit stuck off to round out the top 10. So evap emissions, thermostat rationality, a lot of thermostat codes. And then we're going to see when we go into the SureTrack data, a lot of just general coolant codes as well. So some OEM specific features that are kind of unique, and some of them are definitely unique, and they're the only ones who do this. One of the big ones when it comes to ignition testing, which we're going to talk about here in a few weeks, just ignition testing on modern systems, Hemi ignition coils. So they have unique ignition coils that they use inside their Hemi engines. Now I say Hemi because it's not really truly on a true hemispherical combustion chamber. You would have the one plug in the middle, and it all kind of congregates on that. But that's not what they do. They do two that fire. One is a main, your main firing for that cylinder, and the other one's a waste spark that fires on the exhaust stroke of that cylinder. So it's in there, and these are very difficult to test under standard means that you would normally test a coil. And it's going to say in here, right here. So you can measure resistance. But on the 5.7, the 6.2, and the 6.4, which are all your hemispherical engines, and it has that weird coil, not directly measurable due to a diode in the circuit. So they have a diode in the circuit for secondary. Primary you can measure, but on the secondary you cannot because it has a diode, not directly anyways. And also you cannot test it directly with like coil on plug adapters or anything like that because of the circuitry that's within that coil. So non-traditional means need to be used. What I've seen some people do is they'll just pull out the coil, and then they'll run a plug wire off the coil down to the plug, and then they test it that way. You can test the secondary by putting an inductive clamp around that. So it's a little different, and it's the first time I've ever seen one where it has the double firing on there with those, and they've been around for a long time. But it's just something to note that you cannot test them by traditional means. I get a question maybe once or twice a month, like, hey, why can't I test this coil using coil on plug adapters? And that's why, because it's got all that electronics inside. It won't detect it. It won't pick up on the secondary. And also unique to them, not necessarily unique in the industry overall, but we're seeing a lot more of this, is their ETorque system. So their ETorque system runs off 48 volts, and this is a motor generator, starter motor generator, actually. So see this big belt, it's almost like a supercharger belt, right? Big fat belt. And it's got this motor generator unit here, and it's got all the electronic pack right on top of it. This is on a, I think this one's on the 3.6 and the Hemi's on the other way. Let's see. I got a picture right here. Now the Hemi's on the front, so that was a Hemi. Then the 3.6 is mounted backwards. So that's actually closer to the radiator in the front of the vehicle. So it's mounted backwards. But what it does is the ETorque system automatically stops and starts the engine when certain conditions are met to improve fuel economy and lower CO2 emissions. ETorque enable and disable selection switch is integral with the transmission shift. So there's a little button on the shift. Battery starting and charging systems operate in conjunction with one another and must be tested as a complete system. So remember that if you're testing a vehicle with one of these, because this could be on a 3.6 or on a Hemi, especially on the 1500s. For correct operation of starting charging systems, all components used in these three systems must perform with the specifications. When attempting to diagnose any of these systems, it's important that you keep their interdependency in mind. So you need to remember that. Certain starting system components and functions of the ETorque system are onboard diagnostic monitored and will produce DTCs. Use of a diagnostic scan tool, I just hit that button by accident. Use of a diagnostic scan tool is not only recommended, but it is necessary for proper diagnostics of the ETorque system and the components or systems that are related to the ETorque system functions. Review the component and system information listed below in operations section for diagnostic information. Otherwise, review the wiring diagrams as well as section 28 DTCs. ETorque system uses a high torque electric 48 volt motor to function as a starter for electric stop start. That looks like a massive alternator. The ETorque system, when active, will shut the engine off with a signal from the PCM when the vehicle is stopped, then start the engine when there's demand for power. The ETorque system utilizes its own contained cooling system as well. For more information, please refer to Power Electric. All right, so here's your basic gist of what we got. So we got the power unit, which is in the back, and that's a 48 volt battery. We got the wiring harness, which is your bright orange wiring harness, which it doesn't have to be, but it is. And then the motor generator unit here in the front. So you can see that it's got that massive, looks like an alternator, but it is actually a generator and starter motor all in one. So it's a generator to charge the 48 volt battery when we're driving. And then when we need to start the vehicle, it runs it in reverse, and then it becomes your starter and actually torques the motor over using that big fat belt. So that's how that works in a nutshell. We have other classes that delve more deeply into this. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but that's just kind of your high level overview. And now we get to tips from a tech. This is one of my favorite sections because this is that I really wish I had known that before when I was working on one of those type of thing, right? So if you're working in just a general automotive shop and you don't necessarily see the same brand all the time, you want that information from the people who do work on that brand quite often, right? So if you talk to a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram tech, and they'll tell you, hey, here's a common problem that you might have been chasing your tail for an hour or two, but here's what the actual issue is, and here's how to correct it, right? That sort of thing. And that's what I really like. That's kind of the premise of these classes. It's to get you that information. So we got plenty of that in the other manufacturers we do. We got another one here. So this example is going to be talking about cam sensors, specifically on the 3.6 Pentastar. There's a lot of cam sensor problems, a lot of cam sensor codes. Not necessarily the sensor itself has a problem. And that's where you might get caught up. Because if you think, oh, the sensor's got a problem, or you can even test the sensor and it's not going to look quite right, but it might not be the sensor that's actually causing the problem. Well, let me rephrase that. So the design of the sensor is inherent to the problem that we're going to talk about. So these sensors use what we call a magnetoresistive. It's a magnetoresistive sensor. And there's two sensors, intake and exhaust, on each head. And how that works is you're going to have your actual sensor here. It's got a little chip inside, and it's got a couple sensors in there, and it sees these magnet rotors. So these magnetic rotors are actually going to be on the end of the camshafts here. So you can see how I got, one there and one there. And then I have my sensor that goes in the middle, and it's actually intake and exhaust sensor combined into one. It reads both sides, and it reads those magnets going by. As the magnets go by, they generate a magnetic field inside the sensor reads it, translates it into a electric signal that the computer reads, and then it knows what's going on. However, on these engines, there are also a lot of rocker problems and camshaft problems. So you can see how it's kind of worn out there, and that's kind of worn out. That's kind of worn out. So as it's wearing out, doesn't have to be a massive failure. It's just wearing out. And then I get these little fine iron filings floating around in the oil. Where does the oil also go? Well, the oil also goes around the camshafts, in the cylinder heads, and so on. So what do you think those fine metal particles that are magnetic because they're made of iron or steel, where do you think they go? Well, they go and they attach to the magnets. And then they get embedded on the magnets. And then in that case, it ruins the magnetic field for the cam sensor, and it will give you cam sensor codes, cam sensor issues. And you could replace that cam sensor. And if you don't fix what the actual problem was, the metal filings on here, then you could have another failure pretty soon after you do that cam sensor. So I think that tip is worth its weight in gold. If you've never come across, or if you have come across that problem, especially, and you didn't realize what it actually was, that's going to save you a ton of time next time you just get the borescope out, or maybe pop the valve cover off or whatever and see, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of metal floating around in here. We need to address that first before we address the cam sensor. Could have a cam sensor problem too, but I would say more often than not, that's going to be your cause of a cam sensor issue. So I thought that was a cool little story. All right, let's get to some OEM specific functions that they have on the tool. So we're going to have things like crank position variation learned. When you do the crank and cam sensors, you need to do that, relearn it. It has a VVT system test on there for the variable valve timing, which I thought is very useful because it'll actually go through and cycle the valves back and forth and actually advance or retard the timing and so on. So you can make sure everything's working properly. It will also verify that everything moves correctly and spit out codes if it doesn't. PCM small leak verification test. So that is for a leak, for an evap leak. So it'll actually go in there and uses pressure over time to detect a leak, 5 possible test phases. And then it just walks through. It's a verification test, so step-by-step leak verification test. And there's also a misfire monitor, which they call which cylinder is misfiring. That's literally what it's called. We'll probably see that when we go live on the tool. It just says which cylinder is misfired, and then it gives you your misfire count. There's also another one I didn't put on here. I probably should. For those of you who don't work on their diesels very often, or may get a chance to work on their diesels, and you need to do a DPF regen, it is not called a DPF regen. It is called a stationary diesel. So that could be, if you weren't sure what that was, that could be a little confusing, right? So it's not called a DPF regen. It's not called a regeneration. It's called a stationary diesel. So that's what that's called. And that we've had some calls in the call center for that. Get a little confused, not able to find. As far as transmission, there is a transmission quick learn that is in there that people have had trouble finding sometimes because it's moved a few times. What we try to do on our tools is to mimic the factory tool as best we can without like going way off on weird tangents. So if they move where a test is on their tool, we'll move where the test is on ours, right? So it mimics that. So we don't necessarily take it out, we just move it somewhere else, right? So that transmission quick learn has been a hot topic with that as well. A lot of calls on that. There's also a automatic brake bleed in there. Rear caliper piston retract and extend, and also brake pedal calibration in there. So you need to actually calibrate the brake pedal position sensor on that vehicle, similar to what you have to do on Jeep. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the very first company to come out with a secure vehicle gateway that you needed additional credentials to get into. So starting around 2018, 2019 model year, they started adding these little gateway modules to the vehicle. And what that does is it basically acts as a hardware firewall between the outside world and the vehicles. You cannot do, basically it blocks anything that'll send a command to the vehicle, say, no, can't do it. So you see the OBD2 connector, all the wires go in here except for power and ground. And then anything from the radio, because the radio has Wi-Fi, LTE service. So that's an outside access point. So all the CAN bus goes in there as well. And then it goes out to the rest of the vehicle after you're able to unlock the lock. All right. So when it's locked, you can read codes and you can read data and you can't do anything else. No bidirectional controls, no clearing codes. Anything that sends a command to the vehicle, it'll say, no, sorry, not going to let you. Once it is unlocked, though, you can do anything you'd normally be able to do on like a 2017 and older Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram vehicle once it's unlocked. Of course, there are some things that need to be done in order to unlock it. We'll talk about that in a second real quick. High level, how does it work? So I have my scan tool, I have my vehicles module, and I have the cloud, right? Servers up. So it's going to ping the module. It's going to say, hey, I need your secure ID. I want to get it. So it's going to say, all right, here's my secure ID. And it's going to send the secure ID, the tool ID, which is usually the serial number that you have registered. And then your username and password for AutoAuth. So AutoAuth is the third-party service that they use for this. Sends it all up to Chrysler. Chrysler says, yep, everything looks good, if everything is good. Sends down an unlock code to the tool. Tool then sends that unlock code over to the vehicle. And then it says, cool, I'll let you in. It looks something like this in real time. So request authorization. There's serial number. There's the ID. There's the VIN of the vehicle. Request authorization. Sends it down and it's unlocked. Takes seconds, right? It's not too bad at all. And then you're into the vehicle. Right, so that's how it works, kind of high level. Now, what's required in order to get into these vehicles that have the secure gateway? Pretty much anything 18 and newer on any of these vehicles we're talking about. You need to have current software on the tool. You need an internet connection. In North America, you need a current AutoAuth account, which means it needs to be paid up. It's $50 a year for Stellantis. It's $50 a year for Nissan. The tool needs to be registered with AutoAuth as well. So you need to make sure you put in, pick the tool manufacturer from the drop-down list, put in the serial number of the tool and all that good stuff, and then they'll let you do that. And then also your AutoAuth username and password needs to be registered in your Snap-on profile as well, because that's how our tool talks. So it goes to your Snap-on profile first, and then it takes that information and logs you into AutoAuth, and then AutoAuth does the credentials, and then it just goes back through our servers. So that's how it works on that. And that is super high level because we have talked this to death over the last year and a half. So you can go back and find, there's probably 4 or 5 different videos of this type on YouTube. And then we also have other shorter videos specific to each manufacturer as to how to do that as well. Plus, we have a whole website called snapon.com/gateway. So you can go to any of those resources. There's tons of resources out there for how to get in and do this. And I know this is a major point of contention. It's a major pain point for a lot of you out there because we get a lot of phone calls about it, helping people set it up and things like that. So this is just how Stellantis decided they wanted to approach this. So we have to play by their rules. So that's what's required. So let's go live on the tool, talk about a few things, so we can see with our vehicle representative, so to speak. Pull up my Zeus. Here we go. So first one we're going to go through is the RAM. And we'll just pop in a scanner. Like I said, there's a lot of commonality between the brands and between the 3.6 is the 3.6 is the 3.6. So you're not going to see a ton of differences as far as what's offered for the vehicle in here. Once again, that's security link. So even though I'm under a demo, it has to do that. There we go. Goes through and unlocks. And then there we go. So we'll go into engine real quick. And we'll see we got codes, clear codes, data, memory resets, functional tests, system tests, miscellaneous functions. So between memory resets, functional tests, system tests, and miscellaneous functions is where you're going to find all your bidirectional controls, your functional tests, things like that. So if we go into miscellaneous functions, that's things like ECU information. There's your brake pedal learn I talked about. Read VIN. If it was a blank module, it would actually show up write VIN. You can write the odometer. Reset the memory, reset oil change indicator, PCM small leak verification test. I talked about that earlier as well. System test is going to be stuff like injector kill test, oxygen sensor heater, set engine RPM, BVT system test. That's the automated test I talked about as well. And then there's that which cylinder is misfired test. Doesn't get much more blatant than that as to what it is. And then they consider functional tests like bidirectional control. So that's turning on and off your fuel injectors, maybe like the ASD relay on the older ones. That was a big issue as well. Heater duty cycle, things like that. And then memory resets is going to be fuel adaptives, misfire adaptives, any of your adaptives and stuff like that. It's going to go in there and it's going to do a reset. And you see there's a lot of variance on PCMs in here as well. And if we go into the transmission, miscellaneous functions and system tests. So under miscellaneous functions, that's going to be learned adaptives. And then system tests is going to be that quick learn I talked about, right? So they moved it from miscellaneous functions. That quick learn, it will perform an adaptation of the clutches. Parking brake must be set, brake pedal press, trans temp above 140, and climate control off. I think it gives me an error if I go, yeah, it's got to be running, so I don't have that. I don't have a vehicle hookup. But that's where you would find that. Now let's go to SureTrack. So on a 2019 Ram 1500, this surprised me today. How many repair orders there we have on a 2019 Ram 1500? That's only a 5-year-old vehicle. And this is with the 5.7, so this is the Hemi. This is the most popular engine for that year. And there's over 500,000 repairs for that. So find that interesting. But anyways, things like pads and rotors, always. Batteries, always, because it's in, 5-year-old vehicle. It's going to be stuff, regular maintenance, spark plugs, exhaust manifold, water pump. Number 1 code is EVAP, small leak detected. That's why there's a small leak test in there, because of that. Fuel level sensor circuit, fuel pressure sensor circuit. There's a couple misfires in there. EVAP, shift solenoid in the transmission, oil pressure sensor. All right, so you can see a few commonalities there. Engine does not start. Noise heard, noise heard. Coolant leaks from vehicle. Engine runs rough. Number 1 code that people have punched into this box, not necessarily off their repair orders, but this one is that active grill shutter code. So that is lost communication with AGS. So active grill shutter system is controlled by the powertrain control module over a dedicated network LIN bus. Active grill shutter performs an initialization each time the vehicle started, can be used as a quick way to validate system. So I was going to walk you through that whole diagnostic test with that. That is appears to be a fairly common code, at least as far as people's experience with the scan tool. I don't see it over here, but Yeah, definitely in their experience. Right, active grill shutter there. That's also an active grill shutter code as well, or the air dam. So appears to be a lot of issues with the front end of these trucks. Now, if I were to switch it over to a different engine, the 3.6, which is available, you're going to see 4,459 repairs. Not a very common engine for that year, right? So you can see like a lot of misfires with those 3.6s. Evap again, evap again. And there's that crank cam correlation, but there's only 2 of them, so that's not a huge occurrence. All right, let's pull up our Jeep. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff, so I won't spend a ton of time in here on that. But if we go into like engine, you got your memory resets, functional tests, system tests, etc. Right, which cylinder is misfiring again? A lot of commonality there. This is the 3.6. It's going to give you very much the same transmission stuff as well. Right, learned adaptives and stuff. They all use the same base components at this point. So you're going to see that in there. As far as SureTrack, though, all right, so 107,000 repairs. That's on the 3.6. Pads and rotors, headlights, a lot of headlights. Water pump seems a little high. AC refrigerant seems a little high. Coolant leak, AC and up, engine overheats, evap. A lot of misfires. There's that thermostat code again. So you see a lot of commonality in that as well. Firing order, probably a lot of spark plugs and things like that in there. Battery, water pump, etc. Now let's change to the let's see, the 5.7. So that's the Hemi, 14,000 repairs. Not a ton of those going in the shops. We'll see a lot of commonality there. Evap, coolant thermostat's a lot higher on the list there. Water pump, thermostat, those are pretty high on the list there. Let's go to the diesel real quick just to see. I think this is like the least common one. 12,000 repairs. Coolant thermostat number 1. Turbocharger, underboost. Coolant leak number 1. Coolant thermostat in there, cooling system in there, refrigerant in there. So once again, a lot of coolant stuff. And then lastly, we'll go to the charger. He said it's going to be a lot of the same stuff on there, so I'm just going to go straight to SureTrack. It's going to have the same engine functions, same transmission functions. That's a nice thing, though, if you think about it. If you worked on one, you can work on any 3.6 throughout the range for 10 years is probably going to be the same problems, the same fixes and things like that. So that's not a bad thing necessarily to have a lot of commonality. Suspension control arm 7,000 times. Holy cow. That seems interesting. There's a TSB on that. Let's just see. No TSBs. Thought there might be. You never know when it's that high on the list. PO128, coolant thermostat number 1, 3,000 times. The next closest is 704. Wow, a lot of misfires. AC and op, engine doesn't start, things like that. Let's check that coolant thermostat. See if there's a bulletin on that. Oh, no bulletins on that either. It's just, hey, just replace the thermostat, I guess. We'll see, right? All right, and remember, you could use this as well, and that's on a 3.6, right? Let's go to the 5.7 real quick. I think the 3.6 was the most common. We'll go to the 5.7, do an RT. Yeah, 144,000 repairs is still a lot. Coolant thermostat again, has rotors, coolant thermostat again, water pump, coolant leaks from vehicle number 1, oil pressure sensor. All right, a lot of those. Yep, tire valve stems as well, all right? Suspension control arms again. Control arm's not going to change from the vehicle to engine to engine, so I'm not surprised that that's still up there. But kind of interesting. Now, also realize what I started to say before I changed the thing there. You can use this too if you have a Snap-on scan tool with current software. As long as you have the tool registered with your Snap-on Tech account, which you have to do to get auto auth and all that other stuff anyways. As long as your tool is current and it's registered with the Snap-on account, use the same username and password. Go to shopkeepro.com, use the same username and password you register with your tech account. Log in here and you will get access to all this information. So if you don't work on one of these vehicles and you're thinking, hey, is there a common problem? Another good way to use this is, hey, I'm thinking of buying a vehicle. You can go look in here and see what a lot of the common problems that you might need to be able to look for as well. So I think that's pretty useful, and it's free as long as you have up-to-date software. As I said, it used to be a code you'd have to get and you'd have to punch it in. There's a lot of work to do. We changed it with the last software release, so you only have to have a current Snap-on scan tool registered to your Snap-on technician profile, which you would have to do for auto auth anyways. And then you'd be able to use the same username and password to access this through shopkeepro.com. So I think that's a pretty cool little addition. All right. So with that is Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Stellantis, FCA, however you want to call it, right? It's been through a lot of name changes in the last few years. So hopefully you garnered a few little extra tips and tricks out of this. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about next. Next week, continuing on with our all new classes that we have started a new line of 6. This is number 1 out of 6 right here. So next week is park assist system. So it's more than just a beeping in your car when you get close to stuff. Oh, no. We've pretty much gotten to remote controlled vehicles to park. Now it's kind of interesting. And I will say some of these systems, I don't know how many people are going to actually bother to do all the work to do it just to parallel park a car. But hey, it's out there. And guess what? When they break, we got to fix them. So we're going to talk all about that next week. It's really interesting stuff. I've just been doing research over the last couple of weeks on it, putting it together. And I never really thought too much about it. I usually just thought, oh yeah, it's just the ultrasonic sensors and it beeps and maybe vibrates your butt, right? Not so anymore. It uses a lot of different sensors on the car in order to figure out where the car is in space, and they can actually self-park and self-pull themselves out of spots and stuff. Kind of wild stuff. So join me for that wild journey next week. Same time, same place. As always, 6 to 9 Eastern, snapon.com/OT for if you want to sign up on Zoom. Otherwise, the 6 p.m. class goes to YouTube, youtube.com/snapon-diagnostics, all one word. And then make sure you like and subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. 9 p.m. Eastern class goes to my Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/SnapOnJason, all one word, no dash in the Snap-on, you'll be able to get to me there too as well. That is also, if you get questions after the fact, I would like to say that Facebook is the easiest way to contact me because it'll just come right to my messenger. So then I can just reply, wherever I happen to be. Now, I don't do it at like 9, 10 o'clock at night just because, I need some work-life balance. But if you send it to me, it'll come to my Facebook, and then I can just answer you accordingly there. So that is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me, I would say. Because people ask, how can I ask you questions after the fact? That's probably the easiest. All right. So anything else on YouTube as well? So this is episode number 90. We're counting down 10 more to go, or 9 more to go really now, until we get to big bad episode 100. Then I can go into syndication if I was a TV show, right? But anyways, anything from ADOS to cam and crank correlation and everything in between, it's all available for free, readily available on our YouTube channel. If you scan that QR code, it'll bring you right there and automatically subscribe you as well. Also, I'd like to say, do you get our emails? Hopefully your email is collected at the time that your tool was activated, but if it wasn't, and we understand there's a lot of folks out there that work, you can still sign up if you scan this QR code right here. It'll bring you to a page where you can actually punch in your information. That'll get us your email address, and then you can get our diagnostics knowledge type emails. We're not going to spam you every single day. You're going to get 1 or 2 a week, I think. Things like, this one's a technical focus article on how to diagnose stretch timing chains, right? So it's useful information for diagnostics. So if you would like those types of emails, go click the, scan that QR code, enter your information, and we will give you that information. Like I said, we're not going to spam you. We're not going to sell your information. We just use it for this type of purpose, like, when new classes are, things like that. So definitely make sure we have your email with them. All right, time for questions. Looks like I got a few coming in from both areas. If you are on Zoom and you join late and you're not sure where to ask your question, just go to the Q&A button, either on the top of the bottom of your screen, wherever that is. Type in your question, and I'll get to it in a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to mention my buddy Keith, who also does free diagnostics training. every Wednesday and Thursday, but his is specific to a tool. So on Wednesday, it's on Zeus and Zeus Plus. On Thursday, it is on Apollo and Triton. So it's on 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific. It is one session at night, and it is only on Zoom, and it's meant to kind of be like a little more intimate. I'd like to say, smaller audience, 10, 12 people, whatever. Have the tool in front of you, be able to ask questions, get your answers that you might need on that tool. So if you are interested in that, sign up for that as well. Now, one thing that popped into my head a little while ago when I was getting ready for this, I have a lot of regulars now on Zoom. And what I'm interested to see, because I know when you're on Zoom and you attend on Zoom and we have your email address registered for Zoom, you will get a certificate, usually in the next day or two, for attending that class. Now, I would like to know if any of you watching on Zoom regularly get these certificates and display them. Now, if you do print them out and display them, just as PDF, right? So if you do print them out and display them, I'd like to see that. So if you could take some pictures, like your wall or whatever, send it to the email that you get, the confirmation email from Zoom, and we just like to see that that your certifications are being put to good use, right? So I just would like to see it. Just popped in my head. So if you can, send it, reply to that confirmation email. It goes to our marketing department, and I'm sure they'd like to see it. So with that, let's get to questions. I got a few on Zoom here. We'll start with those. Salvador's checking in from Puerto Rico. Hello, welcome. One of these days, I'd really like to get down there and do some training classes. Let's see. John says the Hemis are bad, but about the MDS lifters going bad. So that's like the cylinder cut, I believe. Just like AFM on Chevy trucks. Have they found a solution to that problem? Not that I know of. Yeah, lifter problems on Chevys. And you know what? I think there is a solution to that problem. Stop using lifters. There you go. Solve the problem, right? Honda doesn't have nearly as much problem with them wearing out because they use overhead cams and rockers, right? And they have 6 cylinders and they have 8 cylinders. So Honda knows how to do it. I think they just take a play out of Honda's playbook. Good question there. Let's see. So David asks under each symptom. So I'm guessing that's on the data there that we're looking at, SureTrack stuff. So is there further information like a common root cause? So yes. Let me pull my Zeus back up here real quick, because that's a really good question. So if I wanted to do a symptom like coolant leaks from vehicle, right, on this one, it's going to come in, and then it's going to give you some related terms that you might be looking up for that. Over here, it's going to be coolant leaking, and then whatever the number one top repair for that was, and then so on and so forth, and it's going to rank them, right? And then if I go to just into general coolant leaking, it's going to give me different things. Like, for example, real fixes, right? So real fixes is going to be, here's what we did, replace the radiator, replace the water pump, etc. It's going to rank them by how many times it was a confirmed fix. Top repairs is going to give you your graph that's going to say, hey, what did we do? It was over 2,000, replaced engine water pump. Causes and fixes is pretty cool too, because you can go in there and then it's going to say, all right, coolant leaks. It's going to tell you what the fixes were and it's going to rank them. Sometimes it's a lot of spaghetti like that, right? But engine overheats, though, it's only those two, and it's going to rank it down. So it might, by symptom, it could be 5 or 6 symptoms. So you're going to get access to all that information. Since I'm in on my ShopKey account, you're not going to get any of this stuff in there. You're not going to get like your testing, your specs and stuff. You need a ShopKey account for that. But anything that says SureTrack there, you would get that with your up-to-date scan tool as well. So not a bad deal if you ask me. Not a bad deal. So yeah, you can definitely drill down deeper. Good question there, dude. Jay says, thanks for the class and the helpful tips. Very welcome. Appreciate it. Let's see. Done. All right. So let's see. John says, I get them, but it takes about 4 days and comes on the same email, just changes the class. Yeah, it's a not necessarily automated, but semi-automated process, right? We have one of our employees. She has to go through the list and stuff and like verify email addresses and stuff like that. So it does take a few days. But I was just wondering if people like printed them out or anything like that, because I know some guys, when I used to do in-person classes for sure, they'd always say, "Oh, I need a certificate, I need a certificate," and then they would hang them up on their wall. So I'm just wondering if anybody does that. So thanks, John. Let's see. Salvador says very educational. If my Spanish is correct. Gracias, thank you. Let's see. Jay says haven't received the last certificate. So if that's the case, send me an email, and we can see if we can print one manually for you. And tell me what class it was too. Yeah, and you have to attend on Zoom too, because that's the only way we can collect your email. We can't do that on YouTube or Facebook because there's no way to capture it. Let's see. Kyle asks, and this might be a good question to answer. I see we got a guy who might work for these guys on YouTube, so this might be an interesting back and forth. But Kyle on Zoom asks, has anyone heard how the new Hurricane Turbo i6 engine they got is doing? Anything notably different between the common engines as far as diagnostic procedures? And that I haven't heard myself, but perhaps one of our friends on YouTube, which is on like a 20-second delay, so might take a minute. And maybe they might be able to answer because I don't have an answer for you on that, but a good question. Salvador says very educational. It's good to refresh yourself. Also once again from Puerto Rico. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. So, all right. With that, I'm flopping over to YouTube. I know I see a few comments and questions over here, so that's good. Hopefully within this time frame, we might get an answer on those Hurricane engines. So Bobby says ABS motor that's on intergalactic back order. That must be that ABS code that we had like top of the range on the RAM, I believe it was, for the top 10 codes. Yep. Nick says hello from England. Welcome, Nick. Thank you for joining every single Tuesday as you do. And then Bobby says all fine and dandy until AutoAuth doesn't work and he can't do anything. Yeah, that would be unfortunate if it doesn't. I haven't heard many stories of it going down very often. But I guess, that's definitely a possibility for that. And Bobby, so Nick says, AutoAuth account cannot set up. I live and work in London, England, having problems. Can't set my address with AutoAuth. Not sure if there's a separate UK site for AutoAuth. Because I know for FCA, Stellantis, let's just say Stellantis vehicles, because that's what we're talking about tonight. For Stellantis vehicles, Nick, you need to go direct to Stellantis in Europe. AutoAuth is not used for those vehicles in Europe because you have like PSA, Peugeots, and Renaults. So over there in the UK, you have to go direct through Stellantis and sign up with them in order to use it. Now, as far as Nissan in the UK, that is through AutoAuth. So I don't know if there's a separate UK AutoAuth site just for that, because I know they got Nissan way before we did over here. So I don't know if there's a separate AutoAuth site for the UK. There probably is. So I would check into that. Might want to call our tech support. Let's see. Bobby says that's the reason why AutoAuth is BS. If you don't have issues, there's no one to talk to about it. If you do have issues, there's no one to talk to. That's true. You pay them for a service, when it doesn't work, there's little to no support. And I get that, and I agree. And that's kind of the risk you run into using a third party. And that's just how they decided to do it between them and Nissan. Ford doesn't do it that way. VW doesn't do it that way. But there are other manufacturers I've heard maybe doing it that way. So that kind of, it screws us all up if one of those sites go down, for sure. Nick can't wait for the next free training video. Bobby says 6,000 tire valve stem repairs has been on one of the components we were looking at, top 10 components. Abel Gracita says hello. Nick says, enjoy my 4th of July. Thank you. I hope I will. Nick says he gets his emails from Snap-on as well. Let's see. Clive Leslie says, I've never received one of your certificates, and that may be because you're watching on YouTube. Like I said, the only way you get a certificate is to watch on Zoom. Now, if you've watched on Zoom and register with your email address, make sure it's the correct email address and make sure it's the correct spelling of your name. Let's see. Bobby says, how are we not talking about Dodge 3.6s and no one mentioned the oil filter housing leaking? Yes, that is another common occurrence on those. And I think that may have hashed out if we looked at one of the 3.6s and then one of the top things is like oil leaks. So I think if we had drilled deeper into that, we probably would have ended up on oil filter housing. I bet. Anthony says to work on automobiles today, you might be considered to be certifiable. Yeah, I get it. I get that for sure. Let's see. Lobo says great session. Thank you. Nick says what page for certificate? So if you want a certificate, Nick, you have to join on Zoom. So if you go to snapon.com/OT for online training, you will find the link to register on Zoom over there. And you would have to attend on Zoom in order, because like I said, we don't know who watches our YouTube videos. We know if they're subscribed or not. By the way, subscribe if you're not. We know if they're subscribed or not, but if it's not, we have no way of capturing the email address and prove that you attended the class. The only way we can do that is on Zoom. We can pull a report. So you have to register on Zoom for that. Bobby also says Ford and VW's way is much better. I'm guessing that's for the cylinder cutout system. Or no, must be for talking about the security link, right? Yes, definitely much better. Ford and VW, way easier the way they do it. Nick once again says enjoy your 4th of July. Got some more coming in on Zoom. We got a lot of people on Zoom today, so I definitely appreciate that. Holy cow! I'm gonna butcher this name, but I think it's Farayi. Says hello from Zimbabwe. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I love people checking in from all over on the world. This is great. This is great. So thank you very much for checking in from there. Salvador says scanner has an extra monitor of some kind of TV to attach to it. If you have a Zeus, you can. A Zeus or a Zeus Plus, you can attach the extra monitor to it. It actually comes with a workstation. You can get it that way as well. I think that's what you're talking about. Dobre Andonovsky says, any of you guys using Dorman oil filter housings on the 3.6s? So Bobby, maybe if we can get that in time, because I know there's a delay on YouTube. So maybe Bobby, if you can get back about the Dorman oil filter housings, not sure. Not sure how if they work any better or not. Daniel says thank you on Zoom as well. So I'll hang out for a minute. Bobby says, yeah, instead of using auto-auth, that's what he says on YouTube. He also says being done internally through them, at least you can get some sort of feedback if there's an issue and might be able to work through it. I personally have never had an issue with that token system, so that's wonderful. I like it. Kyle's answering Dorman thing. So yes, I've used them. They're actually pretty good for a Dorman product. So take that as you will. But it's good we got an answer there. Thank you, Kyle, for that. Appreciate that. I love it when we get this. It doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen every week, but this is a wonderful, wonderful thing when this happens, because I like the questions and answers session. Maybe we can do that for the 100th. Ask a bunch of questions, get a lot of answers. All right. And then Bobby confirms. I assume he must work for them, right? Because it's a lot of this good information from a factory. So. Yep, all we're using is the Dorman ones. They take a bit more because you need to build them yourself, right? So put them together, I guess. But it's definitely a solid piece, which is refreshing for being Dorman. There we go. So another good endorsement for the Dorman ones. Sounds like it's good thing to be doing. Use those Dorman. All right. Anthony Nofire raised his hand over there. What are you on, both? Oh, no, you're always over here. Yeah, but you know where the Q&A is, Anthony. So I don't know what you're raising your hand for. Not sure. But this is really good. This is good. So let me just give it another minute. Just make sure nobody has any other questions they're typing. I'm not the fastest typer either. So either that or we wind down. It's fine too. Oh, got another one coming up here. Kyle says I'm an independent shop tech. We just don't work on a lot of FCA Stellantis stuff. I'm also Nissan certified. Awesome class, by the way. Hey, Kyle, Nissan's next. So I could probably actually use your help. Could you email me? Jason.gabrinas@snapon.com. My name should be up on the screen too. Jason.gabrinas@snapon.com. I want to pick your brain real quick for the tips from a tech section for Nissan. So we don't have a ton of Snap-on guys that work for Nissans. If you could just shoot me a quick email with your contact information, I would love to reach out to you and pick your brain along. So thanks for chiming in on it. Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. See, it's good I stayed on a little bit longer. And if anybody else has tips on vehicles I haven't covered yet, please let me know. Volvo is going to be a little while because I'm doing it by sales numbers. It will get there, but we're doing it by sales numbers, so they're kind of low on the sales numbers. So I will tell you the next ones are Nissan and Mercedes. So that's the next ones in this round. And then as far as looking in the future, I haven't looked that far in the future yet. That'll be the end of the year, October, November, December. So as far as right now, it's the next one is Nissan, and then it's going to be Mercedes after that. Let's see. So Bobby also says I've been seeing a lot of Jeep Inspirator 3.6s roll through the shop. Everything from oil filter houses to camo lifter replacements. There you go. That's just I hear it all the time about the camo lifters, for sure. Yes, at snapon.com, Kyle. So it's jason.gabrinas@snapon.com. Anybody else can email me there too, I guess. All right, cool. Excellent. So I know it comes from the I know the confirmation emails come from the marketing account, but that's just so they can keep track of that stuff. Nick has a 3 million mile Volvo vehicle, or has seen a 3 million mile Volvo. You know what I saw the other day for the first time? I've seen pictures of them on the internet all the time. For the first time the other day, I saw a Volvo with a smokestack coming out of the hood in Connecticut. It's crazy. I haven't ever seen one of those in person, so that was kind of neat. All right. Good talk, guys. All right, cool. With that, that is the end of my time here. Oh, I think I got another one. Keep going. Martin says, what's the best way to clean the cam magnet on the 3.6? They recommend like a soft bristle brush. And I don't know, some good cleaner that's not going to wreck, because I think it's kind of encased in rubber, if I'm not mistaken. So a soft bristle brush, like maybe a toothbrush or something like that, and some good cleaner. You probably take the cam out to do it, but that's what I would do. Thank you, Martin. All right, so with that, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for good conversation tonight. We had a lot of good back and forth. I appreciate that. Hopefully you'll join me next week for what am I talking about? Parking assist systems next week. That's going to be a really enlightening class, I think, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff before I started researching it. So kind of wild how they do stuff nowadays. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. If you are in the U.S., enjoy your July 4th on Thursday. Stay safe. Keep all your fingers. With that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good night. And take care.